hello. Does everyone see me okay? How are you doing? I'm going to wait for the lovely Jenna Hope to join me in about a minute. This is the third edition of Who Am I? I'm really excited. I've had some amazing guests, but this lady, she is one of the top nutritionists in this country, and I'm very excited for her to share with you everything nutrition. And I think right now we definitely need that. Hey, here she is. Right. Let's connect Jenna. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you, Jenna? How are you
Yeah,
doing?
thank you. Can you hear me okay?
You fine, actually. Can you hear me okay?
Uh, Yeah, I'm just going to turn the volume up a little bit. Perfect, that should be all right.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining me today. I'm very excited because you are a very respectable and respected nutritionist.
Thank
You
you.
know everything about nutrition, and I think right now where we are under lockdown, I don't know how you're feeling, but I'm feeling it's time to be released. You know, I have overindulged. I think everyone on here has, and it's always lovely to know what we're doing, what we should be doing when we come out of this, kind of things we should be eating. This Who Am I definitely is just to find out who you are. This is your platform to share with my audience, your audience, who you are. So that's the first thing, and then we can talk about some questions after.
Amazing. So firstly, thank you so much for having me. I love your series,
Thank
and
you.
I think that it's so important to be able to show people that actually there's a lot of noise going on at the moment, especially when it comes to health and well-being and diet and exercise and everything. And I think that actually really the first thing is for people to take a step back and think
Yeah.
about what they want. And I think your series is so well directed at that. So I really love that.
Thank you very much.
Um,
Thank you.
but yeah, just to give people a little bit of an introduction, a little bit of background, I'm a nutritionist. I founded my nutrition consultancy company about 4 years ago now, where I consult individuals, but also brands, restaurants, the media as well, and do some
Mhm.
corporate talk as well.
Mhm.
And I kind of got into nutrition. People always say, you know, how did you get into nutrition?
Mhm.
I grew up in a really healthy house, and actually I really didn't like it. I rebelled a bit. And when I was about 16, I started to become a little bit more aware of my skin and my energy. And for me, it was never about weight at all. And I think that's really important to highlight because I grew up in a time when there was a lot about size zero and, you know, it was all about skinny. But for me, it wasn't about that. It was really about energy and skin and just general well-being. And that's something that I still hold to this day. You know, I do work with people on the way, absolutely. But first and foremost, I think it has to be about how you're really feeling.
Of
Um,
course.
so yeah, around the time I was about 16, I looked to go to university to study nutrition. So I went at university age, I think about 18. And then I did my undergraduate, my master's, and yeah, I've been working since. So it's great. I
Yeah,
love
that's
it.
amazing. And so, wow, there's a long time. And when we talk about nutrition, there's so much misconceptions about nutrition. I think I've had my perception of what it is. As you said, in this time, loads of people are discussing and thinking they need to eat this. And they've even had things that they said would get rid of the corona, which is crazy. We all know
Yeah.
about immune system building. And I think food is what you need to put in to make you healthy. But what are the misconceptions that go around about food? Because I think that's the first thing.
Absolutely. So firstly, just talking about corona, I've
Yeah.
heard so many, like you say, misconceptions about
Yeah.
the latest cure. And if you take a super high dose of vitamin C, you know, that's going to protect you. Or if you take a really high dose of vitamin D, that's going to protect you. And actually,
Mhm.
just to start off by saying, there is nothing that will cure at the moment. You know, if we had a cure and if it was as simple as taking such a high dose of these vitamins, then countries all around the world would not be spending millions and billions of pounds trying to develop a vaccine or a treatment. So, you know, that's the first thing to know. But just going back to even things that people still believe, like you shouldn't eat fats because it's bad for you, or you shouldn't eat carbs and you should follow a really high fat diet, or
Mhm.
calories, everything. So, you know, people say that calories in versus calories out. And whilst there is an element to that, actually
Mhm.
where that calorie comes from, what it's made up of, is much more important than, you know, just calories in, calories out. So I think it's just so important for people to realize that nutrition is not quite as simple as take this and eat this and you'll be healthy. You know, if it was, then my job would be much easier than it is.
Yeah. And then when we speak about food, I believe there's certain food that you need to eat or consume more of when you're maybe an athlete, or if you're trying to lose weight or trying to put on weight. So what type of food variations? And obviously body's type's different. So I think it's unfair to say there'll be one size that fits all. But I'm sure there's certain food that can help with your nutrition and help you in different variations.
Definitely. So when it comes to being an athlete, for example, that would very much depend on what type of sport that athlete is an athlete of, I guess. And so really, you know, it would depend on whether they need a much higher carb diet or a higher protein diet, but generally athletes will tend to eat more anyway. Protein is really important when it comes to recovery, muscle recovery, and just generally making sure that your body can recover and repair itself. So that's really important. But actually, where we get that protein from is what's even more important. So are we getting it from whole sources? So things like meat, fish, eggs, and for people who don't eat those foods, things like beans, nuts, tofu, or are we getting it from really heavily processed foods, or even things like we've seen in more recent years, things like protein Mars bars and protein chocolate bars. And actually, you know, that's not going to provide you with the same quality protein that you can get from the whole foods. When it comes to losing weight, so again, it's just important to be aware of what you're consuming, and what I would say is really trying to reduce your sugar consumption. So actually, when you overconsume on sugar, you're much more likely to crave more sugar, but also overeat, because essentially, without going into too much science, when you eat sugar, your blood sugar levels spike. As a result of that, they spike quite quickly, and as a result, they have to come down. So what goes up has to come down. So your blood sugar levels will then fall, and at that point, when they're quite low, you're much more likely to crave more food and overeat and crave more sugar as well. So really, if you can, and you know, we're all familiar with that feeling of, you know, that sugar high and that sugar crash, and then thinking, oh, I wish I could have something else, some more sugar to give me that boost of energy. So that's what I would say. Focus on reducing your sugar consumption. Make sure that you're loading your plates up with vegetables, beans, pulses, high fiber foods, because the fiber is what will keep you fuller for longer. And therefore prevent you from overeating, because actually you're feeling full, but fiber is relatively low in energy, so that's a really good option. And again, making sure that you're having enough protein, because protein has what we call the highest satiety value. So that means that protein out of everything will keep you fuller for longer, because it takes much longer to be broken down than fats and carbohydrates.
I just want to say hello to everyone. There's a lot of people joining internationally. I heard someone from Turkey. I've got some questions as well, so I'm going to definitely ask. Fantastic. We've got some international exposure. One of the things, you know, we had this big thing that happened with the vegan fad that went everywhere. Everything was vegan, you know, vegan food, vegan clothes, you know, and I tried it. And I failed because I'm such a big protein chicken eater. And I was really worried, like, was I getting the right balance of nutrition from the vegan process? But what I did do as a result, just cut back on certain things and find that balance. And when you speak about vegan, obviously it's phenomenal. It's plant-based, it's all those good things. What do you think would be a good process for someone who's on the line and wants to hear what is good to eat for vegan food? And I never know.
I think that is such a good question, because it's so topical at the moment. And first things first, with the vegan diet, it's not necessarily healthier. So anyone who thinks that they should go vegan because it's a healthier way to be, I would argue against that and say that whilst increasing your plant consumption is healthier, you don't necessarily need to cut out meat and animal products as a result of that. But anyone who wants to go vegan for an ethical or a moral or an environmental reason, absolutely, you know, cannot argue with that at all. And in that case, I think it's just important to be aware of those nutrients that you might miss. So firstly, do it quite slowly. You don't need to do it overnight. But secondly, be aware. So for example, let's start with something like vitamin D, which, to be honest, the whole country is recommended in the UK. That's for UK people in the UK. We're recommended to supplement with 10 micrograms a day. So that is really important. And that stays the same whether you're vegan or not. The next thing that is quite important is calcium. So you can get calcium from things like nuts, tofu, fortified milks, but again, you have to make sure that the milks that you're, so plant milks that you are consuming, are fortified with that calcium. That's really important. Green leafy vegetables as well, really good source of calcium. So just making sure that you're aware of where you can get these nutrients. Another really important one is iodine. And again, that's not one that's really spoken about too much, but iodine, especially for women of childbearing age or pregnant mothers, really important. It's very important for the neurological function and neurological development of your child. And that largely comes from white fish, eggs. You can also get it from things like seaweed and figs as well. But just to be careful, you know, that you are consuming those foods. And if you can't get enough, then to take a supplement. But if you are going to supplement, then just be aware that there are risks of that, and you should speak to a healthcare professional, because supplements can actually interact with your medications. And another one is iron as well. So iron is very important for energy and transporting oxygen around the body. And that again is largely found in animal products, but actually it's found in some plant sources in much lower quantities, and it's less available to the body. So that means that we can't necessarily absorb and utilize all of the iron from plant sources, or as much as we could from animal sources. So that might mean that you need to consume a little bit more, or you can add vitamin C. So for example, if you're having broccoli, which is a source of iron, and you add some lemon juice over the top of it, that will increase the amount of iron that you can get from that broccoli. So just really, you know, I feel like I've just dumped a load of information on you.
I think it's great.
But just to be...
No, and when we speak about foods, you know, which types of foods, as in more plant-based or vegetables, one of the hidden gems in foods, you know, like they got the superfoods, the superfood fad and things like that. There's superfoods. Are they the ones that the superfood that will give us what we need, or are there other foods that we actually ignore that we can get so much from them?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And actually, there's not really such thing as a superfood. I know, you know, it's one of these health fads that, you know, sounds great and is a really, really good marketing ploy, but in the grand scheme of things, a blueberry is better than raspberries. No, not at all. You know, it's just about making sure that you get that diversity, because if you get diversity, then you're going to get enough plant fibers, you're going to get enough of the different nutrients within each food. And that all of that also, whilst it contributes to your overall well-being, contributes to your gut health as well. So in order to create a really good gut health, we need to make sure that we've got enough diversity in our diet, and you know, that's really important.
And as a nutritionist, the people you mentioned that you work with various brands, you work with corporates, what are the things that come up about that? Obviously we're now going to be coming out of lockdown. Some people would have overindulged, some people have been actually healthy than ever been in their life, but like when this is all over, what do you think your next step would be? How would you deal with, you know, the next steps after COVID? Would you find that you'd help corporates, or would it be talking to brands more? Because people will be even more obsessed with their health after this, because they want to make sure that if it peaks, God forbid, doesn't happen again. So what do you think would happen life after COVID for you?
So I think I'll probably continue to do the work that I do with brands and with corporates, because at the moment I've just moved it all online. So whether that goes back to face-to-face, I'm unsure yet. It really depends on how the lockdown is lifted. But from a consumer point of view, I think one of the things that we really need to be aware of and careful of is, all of a sudden, if we are going to be out and about a bit more, we're going to have much more easy access to those foods that before we might not necessarily have kept in our house. So for example, if you're out and about, you can run into the newsagent and pick up a chocolate bar or pick up a fizzy drink, whereas beforehand, if you don't have that in the house, you can't do that. So I think just being hyper aware of your behaviors and your purchasing behaviors, and also what you're ordering in restaurants. So it's so much easier to be healthy at home than it is in restaurants. I think once we come out of this, a lot of people are going to say, oh, once, you know, we overcome all of the next few steps, because I don't think we're not going to be going straight into restaurants, you know, when lockdown is lifted. But eventually, when we are, you know, we have to be aware of not running into restaurants and just going mad because it's our first time in restaurants in God knows how long. So just being aware of those behaviours are really important. Am I saying that you should never have a chocolate bar again? Absolutely not. But is it something, yeah, exactly. Like, is it something that's creeping into your day on a daily basis? You know, maybe look out for that, and that's something that we want to try and limit where possible.
And we have online, I hope, many ladies and gentlemen that have children. And I know it's been a journey of them doing homeschooling. I've seen loads of Zoom feeds with the kids running around and things like that. I mean, what could you recommend for parents to make for their children? Make it fun. You know, it's very easy to grab a biscuit, crisps and things like that. But there's also healthy food that you can make for children that introduces them to good eating. And what do you recommend in that?
Yeah, so that's a really, really important point. And actually, one of the other things that I do is I've co-founded a company called the Yogurt and Juice Network. And what we do there is we focus on nutrition education for children. So within that, again, it's all about providing those ideas. So one of the recipes that we really love is called banana sushi. And basically it's rounds of bananas that you dip into Greek yogurt or peanut butter, and then top with either crushed nuts or some desiccated coconut, and make the food a little bit more fun. So rather than just giving your child a bowl of yogurt with some banana in it, actually this is a much more fun way of displaying it. Another one that we've got on there is pinwheels. So that's essentially a wrap, a falafel wrap with some hummus and vegetables, you know, a great lunch. But if you roll it up and chop it up into what we call pinwheels and then stick a little cocktail stick in it, it just makes it much more exciting and engaging for the children. So definitely recommend that if anyone is interested, head over to the Yogurt and Juice Network. We're on Instagram, and you'll get some great ideas there too. But yeah, it's very difficult, you know, when you're feeding kids at home and you don't know what they want, and one day they'll eat something and the next day they won't. So one of the things that we really do say is try and get your kids involved as much as possible, from the process of deciding what you're buying. I know sometimes you can't take kids to the supermarket, but getting them to shopping lists, getting them to say what they want to make, get them involved with the cooking. You know, if they can't chop, get them involved with adding the spices or the herbs or whatever they can do, and that way they're much more likely to actually sit down and eat that meal, rather than if you just place it in front of them, they'll be like, oh, I don't want that.
And how, you know, obviously as a nutritionist, another thing that you would have definitely encountered, and somebody said actually coconut yogurt, because I don't drink milk at all. Not that I've had an intolerance to it, I just prefer a different style. So I have almond milk, and that's my thing. And one of the things, a lot of people have so many different allergies, and as a nutritionist, you know, you've heard the horror stories. The restaurants have had to change the way they do things. And I won't name the restaurant, but they had to bring in rules where you can see exactly what's in every single food item. And as a nutritionist, what do you recommend? Because that must be very difficult, because nobody knows what someone's allergic to. Have you encountered that within your field, and things have happened when it comes to allergies? Because
I've worked with clients that have got allergies before. I've never actually come across a situation where a client has been misled into thinking that they're eating something that they are allergic to, or they don't know. But what I would say is, if you do have an allergy, then just to be hyper aware. It's not a particularly fun way of living your life, but better safe than sorry. So, you know, if you're going to a restaurant, just make sure you ask and you highlight. I've got friends that have got nut allergies that, you know, if they ate nuts, they die. So when we go out, they're hyper aware, and it's really important that you are like that, and you shouldn't be afraid of that, and you shouldn't be scared of that, because at the end of the day, you're essentially trusting someone else with your life by the food that they're providing you. So really, you know, speak up. That's what's so important.
No, definitely. And earlier on, apologies, I'm trying to remember the person's name, but they asked quite an interesting question for you as a nutritionist. They want to be a nutritionist, so that's amazing. You've got some fans, and they wanted to know what subjects should they take in order to be a nutritionist. So could you give them some advice?
Yeah, definitely. So if you're looking at A levels, for example, then you need 2 sciences. So whether that be chemistry, physics, biology, psychology also counts. In some cases, physical education will count as well. So just check with the university that you want to go to. And then the other thing I would say is that there are so many quick courses online, 6-week courses, but that's not going to provide you with enough research or enough knowledge to be able to go and practice. I studied for 5 years, and you know, I'm still learning. It's just a field that's ever growing. So I would really encourage people. I know it's an investment in time and financially, but it's worth every minute and every second to do it properly and go to university.
No, definitely. And I think you know, you mentioned the time. I think to be an expert, it takes time, doesn't it? And I think you know, people come to you for your expertise and your knowledge. I mean, do you find sometimes if they do come there, they want to do a quick fix or change things immediately? You know, do they realize it takes time? Do you find that might happen with people a lot?
Yeah, we live in a world now where, you know, if you want something, you can order it on Amazon, it will come tomorrow. Or if you're having an email with someone, you expect them to reply instantly. If you want to speak to someone, you pick up the phone. Everything's so instant. But actually, when it comes to your health, you have to put that time in, you have to put that commitment in. And that's the first thing I speak to people about, because I can tell when they want a quick fix. And I'm not the person to help them with a quick fix. I'm all about making long-term lifestyle changes. And it is hard, but, you know, I always say to people, if you want to be successful, you have to work hard. It's exactly the same. So, yeah, I just think you have to be prepared to put the time and the effort in, but you can make changes. And it doesn't have to be that you have to overhaul your diet all in one go either. You can definitely do it in stages and make small changes, because actually the small steps all add up to the bigger steps and make the bigger picture. So, yeah, great question.
No, definitely. And I've had someone ask questions, and please, ladies and gentlemen, add any questions in the field. They've asked about, there's this conversation, there's another thing about fats, good fats, when reduced fats, no sugar. What do you think that the story is behind that? Is it better to have a full fat piece of something as opposed to reduced fat? I tend to go for full fat and just have a little bit and keep it in moderation, as opposed to, because I'm always wondering what's in the reduced fat. What's your thoughts on that?
And I'm so pleased you mentioned that, because that's one of the things that can be most confusing when it comes to marketing. You know, people think, oh, reduced fat, that must be better, lower calories, that, you know, that all of that must be so much better. But actually, when it comes to fats, firstly, fats are essential for our overall general well-being. So the production of our hormones, our brain health, our joint health, they're really, really essential. So we shouldn't just completely cut them out. But secondly, we need some fats to help absorb fat-soluble vitamins. So take milk, for example. Milk contains vitamins A, vitamins D, vitamins E, and they're all fat-soluble. So when you take the fat out of that milk, all of a sudden your body can't absorb those vitamins A, D, and E as well as they could do when the fat's in there. And the other thing is, when you take fat out of a product, essentially fat provides the flavour. So they have to replace it with something, and whether that's sugar or artificial sweeteners, you know, both are used interchangeably now. And essentially you're creating that sweetness. So if it's sugar, then you're increasing your sugar intake, which I would argue is, you know, we want to really try and focus reducing. And artificial sweeteners, the research is still out, so we're not 100% sure on the effects that can have long term on neurological health and gut health. So, you know, always try and encourage full fat where possible.
No, that makes sense. I think there's always a misconception. I never know. You walk into a supermarket and you see reduced fat and you think, okay, I'm being better. You start looking and you're not sure. So I think that was really good that you gave us some understanding on that. Got a question about, after an evening workout, what's the best foods to eat?
So firstly, it depends on the workout that you've done. If you've done something really high intensity, then really make sure that you're eating enough, and you want some protein and some complex carbohydrates as well. So for example, an omelette with some rye toast would be a really good option. And again, it depends what time you're eating. So if you're eating very late, then I'd say try and go for something a bit lighter. So some soup with some beans and pulses. So chickpeas, for example, and some kidney beans thrown in the soup. That would provide a really good source of both protein and complex carbohydrates. But otherwise, if you're eating a little bit earlier, then some fish with some sweet potato would be a good option as well, or some curry with some chicken, but make sure you've got some butternut squash or some chickpeas in there. So there's a couple of options in there, but just make sure that you're eating enough. I wouldn't say don't exercise and then go to bed. Really make sure that you can eat before you go to bed.
Definitely. And there's another question. This is a pre-question. The optimal time to eat breakfast. Now, obviously, some people work late nights. You know, they always say, or another way to put it, they always say breakfast you shouldn't skip. Now, what's your thoughts on that? So, optimum time to eat breakfast, and should we skip our breakfast because we've been sleeping hopefully for 8 hours?
So I'll answer the second part first. Should we skip breakfast? I think you've got to look at the reason why. So if you're skipping breakfast because you're trying to lose weight and you're hungry, but you're trying to suppress that hunger, then no,
Yes.
you shouldn't eat breakfast, because all that's going to happen is later on down the line, during the rest of the day, you're going to feel hungry, your blood sugar levels are going to fall, and you're going to, more likely, you're going to end up eating more than you would have done if you just ate breakfast. If you're not eating breakfast because you are genuinely not hungry at all, and actually the thought of eating at that time makes you feel sick, which some people it does, then I'd say wait until you're hungry. Actually, it's very much about listening to your signals and your appetite rather than what you should do. But yeah, if you are hungry, then don't try and suppress that hunger, because that will come out later in the day and you will end up, or the chances are you can end up eating more. So that was the first part, and that was the second part even. And the first part was, what was your question?
Just when
Sorry.
the optional time to eat breakfast. So it's you are, yeah.
Yeah, so just when you're hungry, really. That's what I'd say.
A good question. What do you recommend to put on weight? It's not easy. So someone wants to put, like, I'm the opposite. I'm always trying to lose weight, but you're right. There's lots of people that want to, you know, put on a bit of bulk. And what do you think would be good to eat to do that?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things with trying to gain weight is you don't just want to be eating anything and everything. That's one of the risks, that when people are trying to gain weight, they think, oh, it doesn't matter, I'll eat whatever. Actually, you still want to be eating those highly nutritious foods. So things that are high in energy, so things like nuts are a really good option. Things like coconut would be a good option. Omelets, which are got some extra cheese in there. Make sure that you're having olive oil when you're if you're dressing for salads, for example. Making smoothies with things like bananas, oats, yogurt, peanut butter. So that's a really good thing to have if you can incorporate that into smoothies, or stir some peanut butter into a porridge, for example. That will also help to gain some weight. And also things like flax seeds and just ground seeds and in general would be a really good thing to add to yogurt and porridge and salads and soups as well.
And back to children again, the packed lunch is always maybe a question for some parents, if they do give that, or sometimes children have school meals. But if they are doing a packed lunch, what would you recommend would be a good packed lunch for them to keep them energized, to keep them not dipping through their school and things like that? That'd be a good idea to.
If it depends on what the parent's making the night before, but it doesn't have to be sandwiches. So those pinwheel wraps would have been a really good option. But also, if they're making like a curry the night before, then, you know, put that in the child's lunchbox in a little Tupperware box. That's absolutely fine. If they're making a piece of salmon, then just make an extra piece of salmon. You know, children really can eat similarly to adults, but as long as it's fun and enjoyable, and as long as they like that. But I think one of the things it tends to be when you're feeding children is you think, oh, they're a child, so therefore they won't like this, and actually don't even give them the opportunity to say whether they like it or not. So really experiment with your child, but don't fear putting things in that you would eat the night before with them. Or little stuffed pitas are a really good option with some falafel and some hummus. That can work too. An egg salad, so it's not really a real salad, but like an egg with potatoes, for example, and some vegetables chopped in there, that can work as well. So they don't feel like they're eating a bowl of leaves, because that's not so child friendly.
I think there's no babies on here, but I can imagine when it comes to vegetables, some children I've seen that adore it, but sometimes it is a struggle, isn't it, to get them to eat vegetables on their plate. I've got a question as well from someone. They've said about alongside water, is there any other fluids you would suggest as a good to incorporate into your diet? So I could think of herb teas for me, because I don't tend to have coffee and tea, but what's your thoughts?
Yeah, exactly. So herbal teas are a great option. Try and reduce the fruit juices, because they're just going to contribute to added sugar. Water, they're kind of the main ones I'd say. You know, you don't really, if you don't have to, then I wouldn't recommend incorporating loads of squash or coffee or anything like that. But if you're happy with water and herbal teas, then that's optimal. That's best.
No, it sounds really good. And then pregnant women, I've noticed there's a boom, because obviously we're at home, and there's going to be at the end of babies born, and which would be fantastic. But obviously pregnant women, it's always a nervous time, isn't it, to know what to eat, certain things they might be allergic to, they get frightened for their children. So there isn't anything definitive I'm sure you can recommend, but what would be a good balanced diet along with their cravings?
So for them, it's mainly just being aware of over consuming on caffeine, ensuring that they're getting enough iron, but really reducing mercury-rich fish, so things like tuna and swordfish. They don't want to be overdoing that. And making sure that things like egg yolks are cooked all the way through, don't eat raw fish. Really, it doesn't have to be that different, but just making sure that enough iron, enough B12, and enough iodine as well. Iodine is really important in pregnancy again. So if they can't get the white fish, then potentially look at having a good quality supplement, a pregnancy supplement. That's really important. It has to be suitable for pregnancy, because some of the mixed multivitamins will be very high in vitamin A, and in pregnancy you don't want to be having too much vitamin A. So just to be aware of that.
Mm-hmm. Has anyone got any further questions? I thought I'd ask just before. Yeah. No, so it's been amazing. There's so many misconceptions, and I think that's one of the things that everyone can attest to when it comes to nutrition. Nobody actually knows, exactly what they should eat, what they shouldn't eat. And, we spoke about the fact that everyone's individual, so there's no hard and fast rules, is there?
Okay.
I think it's really interesting to know that you just got to find a balanced, healthy diet. That's my takeaway. Not be hard on yourself, because I think we can be. We hide away from the kitchen, hoping that we won't go in there and eat and overindulge. And I think at this time we're at home, so we will indulge more than we used to. And it's hard, isn't it? I had a friend of mine, she was on a diet. This is a little joke. And they had an alarm on the fridge. And, and she would go in the fridge and it would go off, and her husband would be like, okay, you're doing that again. And she'd be like denying it. But you don't realize when you are going through a change or something, there's certain habits. It's breaking those habits, isn't it? And we comfort you. I've known to have done that. You eat, it's food, you enjoy it, don't you? And it makes you feel good. So it's quite interesting to think our impressions of what nutrition is. And you've been phenomenal, what you've given me and taken away. And I'm sure the audience can really think about what they're going to do going forward. I think it's great that you've helped with children, because I think one of the hardest things is, because they are at home, knowing what to give them. And if they are working mothers and fathers, you just want to, give them food. But it's good if you plan and you think about it and make it fun for them, So the future is you're going to just see how it goes after you're working with brands anyway now. It'd be great. Have you done any festivals, or do you join lots of those seminars? Do you do things like that?
Yeah, so I do some seminars and some online webinars for different companies. Festival-wise, I've done quite a few in the past. At the moment, obviously, there's nothing coming up, but if there is, then anything I will post on my Instagram. So do stay tuned. But yeah, it's definitely an exciting time, and I think for everyone, just don't be too hard on yourself and go with what feels right for you. That's the most important thing. And just don't compare yourself to others. If someone else that you see on Instagram is setting up a business or smashing their workouts and you're just not feeling like that, it just doesn't matter. You'll have your time and it will feel right eventually, but just don't push it when it doesn't.
No, you're completely right. I think a lot of people, there's so much happening, isn't there, on the social media space, and it can be overwhelming. And you're right, it's about finding that balance. I think I want the listeners to definitely go and follow you. You can say your handle.
Thank you. So I'm at Jenna Hope Nutrition. And if anyone's got any other questions, then you can just ping me a DM and I'll come back to you there.
Definitely. And it's been an absolute pleasure to have a chat with you. And I've taken away a lot of stuff. I'm going to have a look in my fridge now and go, okay, how can I change things and make things better? But one of the great takeaways is basically being happy with yourself, enjoying the experience, not being so hard. And I think that's one of the things we definitely need to stop being. We need to just enjoy food and just think about it like that, So it's been fantastic speaking to you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Rene. I've really enjoyed it. And it's been lovely speaking to you.
No, and we'll keep in touch. And as I said, definitely, guys, make sure you DM Jenna directly. Any questions, she'll be able to help you. And I hope you got something really great for me today. And thank you so much.
Thank you for joining, everyone. Speak soon.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
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 Bye.